Hey YouTube. So I spent the night last night at there's a TA truck stop at Southington, Connecticut, and so I don't know, a little bit right before I went to bed, they sent this load offer, and they have a drop yard apparently. I never had heard about it, but there's this drop yard that I can't even pronounce the name of, but a little town. It's barely inside of Massachusetts, right near the Connecticut-Massachusetts border, and it was about 55 miles away. So they had a trailer, someone had dropped it there, a loaded trailer, and then that delivered this evening at Westfield, Connecticut. And so I thought, well, you know, I'm about to go to bed. I'll just not answer that. Maybe they'll come up with a different load tomorrow, but they didn't. So this afternoon, I don't know, it's probably about 2 o'clock, something like that. They resent the same offer. And so I went ahead and accepted it. And so I I went to that drop yard, dropped the empty trailer, picked up this loaded one, and then I brought it to Westfield, Connecticut. And so now I'm backed into the dock, waiting to unload. And then this place, I've been to this place before. They actually have parking, and they'll allow you to park here as long as you want after you've unloaded. And so it may well be that I'll spend the night here once the load's unloaded and they tell me to pull out of the door. I'll probably spend the night here. So anyway, in response to last night's video, I got an email from Dave, and let me go ahead, and I've got my handy dandy iPad right here, and so I'm going to read the email. It says, "Hi Tom, in tonight's video you mentioned a multi-stop trip from Oregon to some nurseries in New England. I have a clear recollection of you talking about that trip in your podcast as it was happening. I'm thinking it must have been at least 5 years ago because it was before I started driving. I specifically recall it was early spring and you mentioned how filthy the trailer was when you finished. There was also one stop where you had to back the trailer down a long, curvy road. And that, I don't remember how many years ago it's been. It's been a good long while since then. Anyway, he goes on, I've noticed some of the rundown housing out there too. I see a lot more of it in Pennsylvania than New England, mainly in areas where the old factories and mills have shut down. Most of those New England towns were established in the 18th century. So the homes have seen many generations come and go. They have a lot of character, though, and I find them to be more attractive than the architectural monotony of the cookie-cutter suburban subdivisions that sprouted in newer cities like Dallas, Tulsa, etc. Most of the younger people inhabiting those little towns are well-educated, affluent professionals that work in New York or Boston. An increasing number of them do some or all of their work from home. They're physicians, lawyers, CPAs, designers, engineers, etc. Thanks for the videos. Keep them coming. And that's from Dave. And then Ian had also basically sent a little short note, and he said that, you know, of course, Connecticut, there's a lot of insurance here. And that's true. You have a lot of, you know, like the Hartford is a, you know, I know of that, you know, major insurance company, and I think that AIG of, you know, the kind of that's associated with the problem in 2008 is based in Connecticut. So there's a number of different big insurance companies that are sort of based in Connecticut. So that's part of it. You know, of course, Connecticut, these are, you know, Connecticut is a pretty small state. And, you know, all of these states are pretty small, you know, that make up New England specifically. You know, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island especially is just, basically it's just a, you know, there's not much to Rhode Island. It's just it's the Providence metropolitan area, and that's kind of it. So they're very small states, and so the state of Connecticut is a good example. If I don't know, there was probably a Twilight Zone episode, or it might have been, if you remember the old Outer Limits show, black and white version. There was an episode of one of those shows where this town, something kind of took this town, and they were just, this town was just isolated, and I don't know if it was where it was just gone, but it was sort of just taken somewhere, and there it was by itself with the people trapped in the town. And so if that were to happen, you do a little thought experiment. If that were to happen to, let's say, Connecticut, where all of a sudden that was the whole world, Connecticut was the world, and there was no, all of a sudden all of the other places were gone and Connecticut was it, they'd have a hard time surviving, because it's, you have, if it's based on, people driving to other places for their livelihood, if they're driving to New York or they're driving to Boston for their livelihood, then that kind of creates a problem, because if all of a sudden they can't get out of that state, then if this, basically, I guess the state is kind of, in part, it's a bedroom community. And but again, these are small states, and so you're going to end up with some specialized, with some kind of specialized activity that happens. But it's, I don't know, Connecticut, it's just probably because of where it's located, with, kind of closer to New York City and certainly to, fairly close to Boston, it does sort of end up lending itself to be kind of if people are willing to commute, sort of a bedroom community to those places. But then on the other hand, could the thing stand on its own? If could all the insurance really stand on its own without other states? Probably not, and that's not unique to Connecticut. There are plenty of other places that have business that's sort of based on being able to trade with a much wider area. Not only America, North America, Canada, but to be able, in many cases, to be able to trade internationally. So if some states, if they were sort of isolated in that way that I just described, some would be, it would be a shock, but some would be able to survive. Others, especially where, people are going elsewhere for their livelihood and then commuting back, that would be a kind of a shock, if they suddenly found themselves isolated, or if something were to happen to one of those big cities that they commuted to. Or if, let's say, things really went sour in New York and or Boston, the economy just went into the toilet. Well, then Connecticut, at least the people, the bedroom community parts would kind of be in trouble. But so it's interesting. But I think it's probably primarily, Connecticut, and all these New England states are pretty small, and so you kind of end up with a regionalized thing that goes on. The state, I probably talked a little bit about it in my podcast. The state of West Virginia is another one that it's kind of, if you know anything about West Virginia, it's last in a lot of things, and it's kind of economically, it's a fairly poor state. It's probably the poorest state in the country. And if you look at the history of West Virginia, you can, if you look at the history of it, it really didn't become a state until it split off from Virginia following the Civil War, and I guess primarily as a result of the Civil War. it just sort of split off, and I kind of get the impression, of course we don't, without really digging into it, we've probably lost all of the politics of why that would happen, but and they're not going to talk too much about it in a Wikipedia article, but I get the impression that Virginia just sort of decided, well, these parts we don't want, we'll just draw this funny little gerrymandered line, and we'll just call this West Virginia, and we'll be shed of this problem area. And so that may be what happened. Of course, West Virginia is is more of a mountainous area, and I think a lot of those people, because of the terrain, were isolated, and that isolation probably really, and the terrain probably really doesn't lend itself to as much commerce as other types of terrain do. Of course, West Virginia, had the coal mines and what have you, and that was in large part because of the terrain, and the terrain has ended up, of course, nowadays the Obama administration and the Democrats are doing whatever they can to kill off the coal mining, coal industry, and that's certainly not going to help West Virginia at all, because they still rely on coal mining, and we generate a lot of our electricity with coal as well, at least 50% of it. And I think people are in for a big surprise when their electric bills keep going up. But oh well, that's another problem. And without getting political, there is no political solution. We're in the problem that we're in because of morals. The morals have really started decaying in the 1950s. The evidence of that is in the 1960s, and it's gone downhill from there. And so all of these out-of-wedlock births and so on and so forth, there's a consequence to it. We're really paying the consequence now, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse as society deteriorates. You have ultimately, if you can just take money out of the equation, because money is simply a medium of exchange. People get all hung up on what money is, and somehow they think the government prints it and somehow the government gives it value. It doesn't work that way. It's just a medium of exchange. So if you can do a little thought experiment, take money out of the equation, you realize that there are people that are working, they're busy slaving away, producing goods and services. And then you have a growing group of people that don't. They're not really producing anything, or they're not producing anything. In the case of bureaucrats, they're not producing anything of value. In fact, they're parasites. They're a drag. And so you have less than 50% of the population now is actually producing something, doing something worthwhile. And the majority is, everybody consumes from the pile. So you have people that are contributing to the pile of goods and services, and then you have this larger majority that, including the people that are contributing, everybody's pulling from that pile. And so the fewer people you actually have producing, lifestyle goes down, doesn't it? The more people you can get producing and adding to that pile of goods and services, the better everyone's lifestyle becomes. And it's as simple as that. Forget about the money thing, and because the only reason money has any value is because people work. Just imagine, go back to the Twilight Zone. Remember the episode where the guy was the last guy in the world. Well, you can have whatever, you can have giant piles of gold. Is it worth anything? No, because there's nobody working to produce to give it value. And the only reason money has value is because people are trading. They're trading their time. They're trading their effort. They're trading the products of their effort, the goods and services that their effort creates. It's very simple, nothing complicated at all about it. So anyhow, I need to cut this off. It's we're 15 minutes. So in any case, from Westfield, Massachusetts, I'll catch you later.